You're aware of an exception for archived web content, but how do you actually archive the web content? That's what we're going to talk about right now. On the screen with me is an accessible.org blog post titled How to Archive Web Content to Meet the ADA Title II Exception. We are going to scroll down to a 7-step list that starts with number one: designate a section of your website for archived content. This can be as simple as going to your website directory and creating a subfolder, naming it archive, and then the result is an example like mycountygovernment.org/archive. And on that archive page, that's where we're going to house all of our archived web content. Step two, explicitly title the page and use a similar H1 indicating that the content is archived. When I say H1, I'm referring to a heading level 1. Step three, provide information and instructions on the page to explain what the content is. Step four, state how the content qualifies under the ADA Title II web rule. Now, steps two through four are completely at your discretion. The DOJ in the web rule has stated that public entities have flexibility in how they go about archiving web content. But my approach is to make this very obvious and very straightforward so that nobody is mistaken as to what the content on this page is for, that it is archived web content, and that it meets one of the exceptions under the ADA Title II web rule so that we do not have to make this content WCAG 2.1 AA conformant. And that's what steps 2 through 4 all get at. We're making this very obvious. Step five, also provide at least one methodology to request an alternative accessible version of any document or any other content, be it a video, audio, etc. Step six, organize the content using subheadings, so H2s and H3s. We want to group the content. We want to make it user friendly. Even though we don't have to make all of the content accessible, we still want to make sure that this page is the page itself is accessible, and we want to make sure that it's user friendly. So here I have organizing the content using heading levels. You may also want to group similar types of content, so content that's in the same format. Let's say we group spreadsheets together, or we group by the date of the content when it was produced, etc. So obviously this is going to depend on what content you have and how much content you have. Sometimes it can be practically difficult to structure everything and have everything organized so precisely, but we do want to provide at least an entry level organization and structure for the web content that we have archived. And then step seven is to establish your own organizational policy on how to handle requests for alternative accessible versions of the content. You might already have this in place, but if you don't, you really want to make sure that you do have a policy on how to handle requests. And this gets back to step five, which I stated, also provide at least one methodology to request an alternative accessible version of any document or any other media. So it could be a video, it could be audio, and so on. So this is very important because under the Americans with Disabilities Act, we still need to provide for effective communication. And I'm going to scroll down this blog post and we're going to get to a section titled The Accommodation Alternative. So even if you have web content that qualifies for an exception, so if you archive this web content, it meets an exception under this new ADA Title II web rule, keep in mind that state and local governments and their instrumentalities under Title II of the Americans with Disabilities Act still need to provide for effective communication. So if someone requests an alternative accessible version of, let's say, a document, you still need to provide that document in an accessible version. So you still need to have the ability to meet that request. So this is very, very important to keep in mind, and that is why I talked about providing at least one method of feedback, optimally more than one. but you want to make sure that you have a process on how to handle these requests so that you know what to do when and if you receive one. So this is very important. And throughout this blog post, I've been talking about how to actually archive the web content. What you have to remember is that there are 4 conditions that must be met for you to actually archive, to successfully archive the content and qualify for this exception under the new ADA Title II web rule. So one of the conditions is that we have this section that is clearly designated as archived web content, but keep in mind, you need to meet those other 3 conditions. And I have this contained in this blog post. So I will link to this accessible.org blog post. If you need help with archiving web content, feel free to reach out to me, and I'll be glad to help you. And this is not as difficult as it may seem, but it is important, is very important to get it right, because obviously there is a lot, especially for some public entities, there's a lot of content that needs to be archived. And so if you would like services to help you with archiving this content, we can make sure this is as easy as possible on your public entity, and then making sure that we have methodologies, a policy in place for handling these requests. So this isn't overly difficult. If you have larger volumes of content, there's going to be more work involved, but we want to make sure that we get this right so that we do qualify under the exception of under the ADA Title II web rule. And we want to make sure we have everything in place just right, so that the archived web content is still very usable, it's still accessible, and then we actually meet this exception under the ADA Title II web rule. I will link to accessible.org in the description. The last thing to keep in mind is that we can't just put all of our content under archived web content. It needs to actually qualify for the exception. And remember, there are 4 conditions that must be met.